911, what's your emergency?
What happens when jealousy turns into murder and the truth waits decades to be heard? Los Angeles, 1986. The city pulsed with neon signs, the hum of traffic, and the restless energy of a metropolis where ambition and danger lived side by side. In Van Nuys, a quieter suburb tucked away from the chaos, Sherri Rasmussen believed she had carved out a safe haven. At 29, Sherri was already admired in her field. A nurse, dedicated and brilliant, she carried herself with warmth and confidence. Colleagues described her as someone who could calm a room with her presence. Patients trusted her instantly. Friends adored her. And at home, she shared her life with John Rutan, a young engineer she had married just 2 years earlier. Their condo was modest, but filled with laughter, plans, and the kind of love that felt unshakable. But shadows lingered. John's past relationship with Stephanie Lazarus, an LAPD officer, had ended years before, yet Stephanie had never truly let go. Sherri confided to her family that Lazarus's jealousy unsettled her. There had been moments, tense, sharp, when Stephanie confronted Sherri directly, warning her to stay away from John. Sherri brushed it off, but the unease remained. On the morning of February 24, 1986, Sherri took the day off. She planned errands, maybe a workout, maybe a quiet afternoon. The condo was still, sunlight filtering through blinds, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. It was the kind of silence that feels safe, ordinary, but ordinary can fracture in an instant. By evening, that silence would be broken, not by laughter, not by love, but by violence. When John Rutan returned home, the silence was wrong. The air felt heavy, unnatural. He stepped inside and froze. His wife, Sherri, lay sprawled on the living room floor. The scene was brutal. Sherri's body bore the marks of a violent struggle, bruises across her arms, blunt force trauma to her head, and 3 gunshot wounds to her chest. A vase lay shattered nearby, shards glittering in the dim light. Furniture was overturned, drawers pulled open, valuables scattered. It looked like a burglary gone wrong, but something about it felt staged. The most chilling detail was the bite mark on Sherri's forearm. It was deep, angry, a wound that spoke of rage. Whoever had attacked her hadn't just wanted her dead. They wanted her to suffer. The police arrived quickly. Officers surveyed the scene, noting the broken glass, the scattered items, the signs of forced entry. Their conclusion was swift. A burglary interrupted, a homeowner caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Sherri's family wasn't convinced. They remembered her warnings, her unease. They knew Sherri feared her husband's ex-girlfriend. Yet the police didn't pursue that lead. The burglary theory was easier, cleaner. The condo was sealed, evidence bagged, photographs taken. But the truth, the real story of what had happened in that room, was buried beneath assumptions. For Sherri's family, the nightmare had only begun. The Rasmussen murder file was closed almost as quickly as it was opened. The official story was simple: a burglary gone wrong. Sherri had been unlucky, caught in her own home when intruders struck. The case was shelved, and Los Angeles moved on. For years, the family carried the weight of unanswered questions. Holidays were hollow, conversations always circling back to the same point. Why had the police ignored her husband's ex-girlfriend? Why had they refused to look deeper? Meanwhile, Stephanie Lazarus thrived. She wore the badge proudly, rising through the ranks of the LAPD. Colleagues admired her, trusted her. She became a detective, respected for her work, her confidence, her composure. To the outside world, she was a model officer. The case file sat in archives, gathering dust. Evidence was boxed, photographs faded, memories dulled. Detectives moved on to fresher cases, newer crimes. Sherri's murder became a statistic, another unsolved tragedy in a city full of them. Yet time has a way of shifting the ground beneath us. Technology advances, forensics evolve, and secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of resurfacing. By the late 2000s, whispers of cold case reviews began to stir. Detectives were reopening old files, applying new science to old evidence. And in one dusty box, the Rasmussen case waited. The bite mark on Sherri's arm, once overlooked, dismissed as irrelevant, was about to speak louder than any witness. Forensic specialists carefully extracted DNA from the preserved swab. The results were startling. The attacker was female. This single revelation shattered the burglary theory. Random intruders were unlikely. The evidence pointed to someone Sherri knew, someone with motive. Detectives began to quietly revisit old suspicions. Sherri's family had always mentioned Stephanie Lazarus. She had motive, jealousy. She had opportunity. She knew John, knew where Sherri lived. And now, the DNA suggested she was the killer, but proving it required caution. Lazarus wasn't just any suspect. She was an LAPD detective, respected and trusted. Investigators couldn't risk tipping her off. They followed her discreetly, watching her routines. One day, she discarded a cup after drinking. Detectives retrieved it, rushing it to the lab. The DNA matched. The bite mark from 1986 and the saliva from 2009 told the same story. Stephanie Lazarus had killed Sherri Rasmussen. The silence of 2 decades was broken. The case was no longer cold. It was burning. Detectives had their match. Lazarus wasn't just any suspect. She was one of them, a veteran LAPD detective with decades of service. Investigators knew they had to move carefully. If Lazarus caught wind of the investigation, she could destroy evidence, manipulate colleagues, or even flee. So they built their case in silence, step by step, until the moment was right. On a summer morning in 2009, inside the very headquarters where Lazarus had worked for years, detectives staged her arrest. She was called into an interview room under the pretense of discussing a routine matter. The walls were sterile, the lighting harsh. Lazarus sat down, calm, unaware of what was coming. Then the questions began. They asked about Sherri Rasmussen, about 1986, about her relationship with John Ruetten. Lazarus shifted in her chair, her composure cracking just slightly. She denied involvement, claimed she had moved on long ago, but the detectives pressed harder. Finally, they revealed the DNA evidence, the bite mark, the match. The silence in the room was suffocating. Lazarus's face hardened. She didn't lash out, didn't panic. She simply sat, breathless but calm, as the weight of 2 decades of secrets closed in. Moments later, she was handcuffed. Colleagues watched in disbelief as one of their own was led away. The irony was staggering. A police officer, sworn to protect, now accused of a brutal murder she had hidden for 23 years. The arrest sent shockwaves through the LAPD. Whispers spread through the halls. How had she carried this secret for so long? How had the system missed her? For Sherri's family, the moment was surreal. After decades of grief and frustration, Justice had finally taken its first step. March 2012. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. After 26 years, the murder of Sherri Rasmussen was finally being tried. At the center sat Stephanie Lazarus, once a respected LAPD detective, now accused of a brutal killing she had hidden for decades. The prosecution opened with precision. They painted the picture of a young nurse, full of promise, whose life was stolen in a storm of jealousy. They laid out the evidence: the bite mark, the DNA match, the staged burglary, and Lazarus's history with John Ruetten. Every detail was a thread, woven into a tapestry of rage and betrayal. Witnesses took the stand. Sherri's family spoke of her fear, her unease about Lazarus. Former colleagues recalled Lazarus's obsession with John, her inability to let go. The autopsy report was read aloud, describing the blunt force trauma, the gunshots, the bite mark. Each word a reminder of the violence Sherri endured. The defense fought back. They argued the evidence was circumstantial, that DNA alone didn't prove intent. They painted Lazarus as a dedicated officer, a woman under pressure, someone who had snapped in a moment of weakness. But the prosecution countered. This wasn't weakness. It was execution. Lazarus had left the room, retrieved her gun, loaded it, and returned. She had aimed. She had fired. Jurors listened, their faces tight with disbelief. The image of a police officer committing such a crime was almost unthinkable. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Day after day, the trial unfolded like a grim play. Photographs of the crime scene were shown: the shattered vase, the overturned furniture, the lifeless body of Sherri. The bite mark became a symbol, a scar that carried the truth across decades. When closing arguments came, the prosecution's words cut through the silence. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Sherri Rasmussen's voice has been silent for 26 years, but her wounds speak louder than any witness. And they point to one person: Stephanie Lazarus. The jury retired, the weight of history on their shoulders. Hours later, they returned. The jury filed back into the courtroom, faces drawn tight with the weight of their decision. The silence was suffocating, every eye fixed on the foreperson as they rose to deliver the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. The words cut through the air like a blade. For Sherri Rasmussen's family, it was a moment of release. Decades of grief and frustration finally answered. Tears flowed freely, a mix of sorrow and relief. Justice had taken 26 years, but it had arrived. Stephanie Lazarus sat motionless. No outburst, no collapse. Just a cold, detached stare, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her mind. The badge she once wore with pride was now a symbol of betrayal. The judge's sentence was clear: 27 years to life in prison. The courtroom remained hushed, the gravity of the moment pressing down on everyone present. A respected detective, once trusted to uphold the law, now condemned as a murderer. For the LAPD, the conviction was a scar. Questions rippled through the department. How had she hidden this crime for so long? How had the system failed to see the truth? For Sherri's family, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but the wound of her loss would never fully heal. They had fought for decades, their voices ignored, their suspicions dismissed. Now, the truth was undeniable. The conviction of Stephanie Lazarus in 2012 closed one of Los Angeles's most haunting cold cases, but the echoes of Sherri Rasmussen's murder lingered far beyond the courtroom. For Sherri's family, the verdict was both a relief and a wound reopened. Now, with Lazarus behind bars, they finally had justice, but not peace. Sherri's absence was permanent, her laughter silenced, her future stolen. The trial had given them answers, but it could never return what was lost. For the LAPD, the case was a reckoning. One of their own had committed murder, hidden in plain sight for 23 years. The department faced questions about how Lazarus had evaded suspicion, how the initial investigation had failed so profoundly. It was a scar on the institution, a reminder that even those sworn to protect could harbor darkness. For the world, the case became a symbol of persistence. It showed that justice, though delayed, could still be delivered. It highlighted the power of forensic science. A bite mark preserved for decades had spoken louder than any witness. And it underscored the danger of obsession, of jealousy left unchecked, of rage disguised as love. Stephanie Lazarus now serves her sentence in prison, stripped of her badge, her freedom, and the life she once built. Sherri Rasmussen rests in memory, her story told not just as a tragedy, but as a testament to resilience. The Greenbrier ghost may have been folklore, but Sherri's case was real, a haunting reminder that sometimes the dead do speak. Through wounds, through evidence, through the relentless pursuit of truth, their voices echo until justice is heard.